Okay, so good day to you. I'm here with Loch Kelly, and today we're going to talk about Loch's book and some of the themes in Loch's book. It's called, probably can't see it from there, but it's called Shift into Freedom. And this is along a thread of non-dual interviews that I've had on my channel. The last interview that I've had on this theme was with John Prendergast. I think that was a couple of months ago. But it's in this theme of embodied non-dual awakening.
Yes.
Now that's a lot already. But maybe let's start with embodiment.
Sure.
What is an embodied awakening?
Yes. So maybe to begin, even to say that in the field of non-duality, there's really seems to be at least two major definitions. And one definition of non-duality is as if non-duality is moving from dualistic mind to what they call non-dual awareness, or awareness that's transcendent and not of the dualistic world.
Okay.
Whereas the definition of non-duality from more Buddhist perspective, which is where I come from, non-duality means two truths. It means the awakening to the awareness that's transcendent, but it also means that it includes already, by definition, the immanent world.
Mm-hmm.
So the ultimate reality...
What does immanent mean?
Immanent means within.
Mm-hmm.
So the ultimate reality and the relative reality are not two.
Mm-hmm.
So by definition, non-duality, as I explain it, means embodied.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think, now correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Because I think the sort of absolutist view is expressed by Shankaracharya.
Can be, yes.
Can be.
Yeah.
Because from what I understand,
Yes.
now this is obviously a very, scholarly thing to be able to say this accurately.
Yes.
But what I interpret from Shankara's view is that the absolute is non-dual and the relative is not.
Is dual, that's right.
Yeah.
And from the Buddhist view, non-dual means ultimate reality and relative reality are not two.
Mm-hmm.
So they use non-dual meaning not two. The interpretation from the Hindu tradition would be saying that something like the world is illusion, only Brahma is real. That would describe the first view.
Mm-hmm.
But then the third statement would be the world is illusion, only Brahma is real, the world is Brahma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's more the view that I take from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
that there's a paradoxical inhabiting rather than a transcendence or an escape or a leaving dualism as if it's illusion or as if it's not real. Ultimately, the ultimate awareness, as Shankara says, is ultimately real, but the appearance of the relative is made of the ultimate.
Mm-hmm.
And that so our human condition has the ultimate inherent within it, and the forms are not real in themselves, but they are the waves of the ocean of awareness.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. This is clearly a point of contention.
Yes.
That is not just contemporary, but goes back
that's right.
thousands and thousands of years between the non-dual traditions and paths.
Yeah.
Now, since we are on that topic, I'd like you to expand a little bit on some of the terms that you used in in your book. You talk about waking. So there was waking up, waking out, and waking in. Please correct me if I'm getting it wrong, but could you tell us about those three?
Yes. So
and those stages.
Sure. So waking up, waking in, and then waking out.
Okay.
So waking up would be kind of what we were describing. You wake up from a kind of point of view where you feel like you're looking from a contracted perspective, a sense of a small sense of self, You wake up from that pattern of looping thought to discover that you're not that. You wake up from that and then out of that. And just leaving that can be kind of an awakening, or beginning of awakening, but then it's also just as important to wake into the discovery that that emptiness is aware. So that you wake into the awake awareness as the new view, as the new dimension of consciousness from which you're now looking.
Okay.
Yes.
So when you say in,
Yes.
where is it going into? Is this
So
relation
that's
to the
next,
body?
Yeah, the next one is in.
Okay.
So that's just like two parts of waking up. You wake up out and then into awareness. Then that awareness wakes in to discover that form is emptiness, and then emptiness is form. So emptiness is form is the part that often is forgotten. So once we discover emptiness is awake and aware, and then emptiness or formlessness is discovered to be none other than form. In other words, the feeling is then there's inhabiting or a discovery that the aliveness of our body is just a wave of the ocean of awareness, and there's not two things going on. And so the feeling is what's described as embodiment. You feel like the center has shifted from being like a little mini me behind your head looking out. That opens up into this vast field of awake awareness. Then that awake awareness feels like it's inhabiting or inherent within, or they're included in the awakening, so that you're a human being that's awake.
Now, so my own understanding of this, and I would like to get to you to waking out.
Yes, that's next.
But this process of, so you have the ego. You've seen that I is an illusion.
Yes.
From the waking up.
Yeah.
It's very clear.
Yeah.
That I is. It seemed very solid before. Like
That's right.
it's just like we never questioned this I. Yeah. But then you come to this stage where you see that I is just empty. It's complete.
Yes.
It's as empty as anything else.
That's right.
So there's no real validity to
That's
this I. Now then, this thing with the waking in is almost as if the space enters into your psychological mechanisms that have been there
Yes.
before the awakening process. It's almost
Yes.
as if the space is now aerating the old ego patterns that you've sort of encrusted or been conditioned with throughout the development. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is to say that it already, in some ways, it already is. So when you kind of follow it, if there is something on the ultimate level, the awakeness is already embodied, it's already inherent within or within you. You're just not aware of it because you're looking from this looping pattern of the small I that can only see so much. That's perception is limited, and you have a mistaken identity. Once you discover, or you don't discover, the you that starts actually has to let go, and then what's aware is awareness aware of itself as pure awareness, and then often following, or some people just drop right into the discovery that awareness and aliveness or appearance are not two things. And then the feeling or the experience from awareness rather than from the doer is there's a kind of infinite, boundless field of empty awakeness, but it also includes and is appearing as what's called in Zen ordinary mind. But that mind is not the conceptual mind, it's more the heart mind. So there's a kind of a new centerless center, really, but a new contact to where you're able to operate from. And then that's where waking out begins, is from that heart mind, you start to also perceive not only are you this aware field, which is inhabiting your body, but that same awareness is equally in everyone else and everything. So you're waking out to relationship and you're waking out to activity. So now you can operate, you can type, you can talk, you can walk, you can create from here without having to go back to create this I, which seems to be initially important to function. And that's why people get it and lose it.
Or why they're even afraid to sort of go past the gateless gate.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, this ties in. I agree with this, with my own experience, because I think there is a lot of misconception of people who have awakening experiences, and you know, I guess maybe Eckhart Tolle has done a lot for this kind of stereotype, because you know, there's this perception that once you have those awakening experiences, then sort of your whole life goes to pieces.
Yeah.
In a way, it does, but it remains exactly the same.
Yes.
Nothing really shifts except for this dimension that we're trying to talk about, because it can be very difficult to explain it for someone who hasn't experienced it or hasn't dived into the self-inquiry part of it and just examining it from the intellectual point of view.
Yes.
Now you talk about heart.
Yes.
You know, again, that's another thing that's very difficult to explain. What does it mean to live from one's heart, and how do you do that, and what is that like?
Yes. Yeah, so, I mean, heart is interesting because for us, you know, we have what I would say, the physical heart, and in some ways people feel almost like an emotional heart here. And then maybe there's below that is the heart chakra. So it's almost like heart chakra, physical heart, emotional heart, where you kind of get that feeling of emotion in your throat, and then, you know, that people drop down and then they start having to, and they go, oh, I better go back up to my head. But this heart is almost like a doorway, like an open doorway that opens up back and forward, and is more about like space, like a heart space, but it has you know, it's part of your body, but it's a lot about the awareness inherent within as it contacts your physical form and appears in form. So it's been called heart mind. It's been called, even in Christianity, Thomas Aquinas called it the eye of the heart, oculus cordis in Latin. So there's this whole tradition of even when Carl Jung came to the United States and went to the Taoist Pueblo and asked there, you know, what do you think of the white people who have come here? And the chief said, well, I think they're crazy because they live in their heads. And he said, well, where do you live? And he said, right here. So there's something traditionally that is felt to be this, and certainly now even with, you know, there's some research that says the same cells are in the heart and some in the gut that are in the brain, but regardless of what it is physiologically, there seems to be a feeling of dropping from head to heart, a kind of opening to a boundless center, but then a contact with your whole body from head to toe. Some people don't feel it so much here, but almost as if it's equally in every cell. And there's a non-conceptual way of processing information that doesn't need to go up to look to thought, but it's almost as if the files are poured back into the field of awareness or into your body, and you have more of almost like a continuous intuition.
Yeah, I was just going to go there actually, because it's almost as if you are working with a very low-powered computer before this experience.
Yes.
But then when you remain in the heart and remain perceptive to your intuitive impulses or influxes, then it's almost as if some very intractable problems, the solutions arise naturally.
Yes.
And it arises naturally with the flow of life.
That's
so it's
right.
almost as if your life takes on an effortless quality to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And I wanted to mention about the heart because this is another interest of mine. I've been following the research with heart math.
Okay. Yes.
And I'm a fan of another author. His name is Stephen Harold Booner.
Okay.
And he wrote this book called Plant Intelligence and the Imaginal Realm.
Okay.
So he is talking about the heart as a field.
Okay.
Right? So it's an energetic field in which you're obviously interacting with different other organisms. So can you imagine now there are two heart fields that are interacting now between you and us. So
Yes.
there's communication there on a heart level. It's obviously modern science would say whatever, you know. And so yeah, I mean this is somewhere.
Yeah, that's part of it. I think somehow. I don't just I'm curious and interested in that.
Yeah.
But I think there's something else that's even like that almost moves from into the energy level and into some of the cellular level. But even prior to that, where the empty awakeness first comes into form, it's almost like the feeling of an emptiness or a flow that has the potential to know any information from your head, rather than when you try to use the low-powered computer very fast and try to be smart, you're like thinking and referencing and referring, and what is he going to say? What am I going to say? What do we say? Whereas here, you're just completely calm, open-hearted, open-minded,
sure.
And you have kind of a trust that you're going to be able to answer it, even though you don't know yet what you're going to say.
Yeah.
And then the information comes. And it's just, you say it, and you're even surprised sometimes, like, oh, that was pretty good. That made more sense than I thought I was going to say.
Yeah.
But it's almost like a processor that has everything available. I mean, they talk about in psychology, functioning from the flow state.
Yes, I was going to mention that.
Yeah. And that is kind of the same thing. It's the flow state. This researcher Csikszentmihalyi talks about the qualities are that you feel like you have no ego, that you feel interconnected with everyone, that you're highly functioning, whether you're doing a sport or you're playing music or you're whatever you're good at, you've programmed the information of functioning into your system, which those who are able to be in the flow have done. And then it's as if you don't have to think about it. You just know it by heart. Right?
Yes.
That's even the phrase, know it by heart. But not only know it by heart, and not only being passive and being and just sitting around, but literally the most active, creative, highly functioning ability from this.
Yes.
Which is really what is potentially possible for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. My own experiences with this is as if you are, I haven't had that many experiences of this either, but it's almost as if you're looking at a film going by in these states. But there's no disconnect either. You're completely there, but the elements that frustrate you from your optimum performance are not there anymore.
Yes, that's right.
It's almost as if all the brakes have been taken off and the film is just playing.
Yeah. Yeah, your conditioning is playing through your kind of in the background. So it's included, but it's not dominating and you're not identified with it. So everything's welcome, everything's here. Sometimes it's very quiet and as if nothing's, but sometimes it can be as active as anything, but it's not dominating you and it's not getting in your way, and you're not identified. It's just life is happening, and yet there's something else, some other intelligence and ability to respond rather than react. And you're able to respond, and you're not just in a, zoned out, I'm awake and I have no preferences.
Yes.
You're really, actually your most loving, emotionally available, creative self without fear or worry or any sense of shame or,
Now, the other thing which I wanted to talk about is lineage.
Okay.
the sense of transmission.
Yeah.
Right. So in India, it's very important this is why having a guru is very important. That sense of sitting in front of somebody who's been through these experiences, and you know that whatever he's talking about, which sounds very simple, it sounds very idiotic almost, but he's experiencing something that you currently are not. So that kind of abiding with somebody who is in that state, I think, is actually very important to talk about. And I would like to add it on to the fact that you've trained with Tibetan teachers.
Yes.
And you trained in the technique called Mahamudra Sutra.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes. So Sutra Mahamudra is kind of it builds on the sutra tradition of Theravada Buddhism, but it's like the transition to Tibetan Dzogchen. So it's similar to Tibetan Dzogchen in that it's a direct recognition that there's small pointers that are taught, and then you do kind of a self-pointing, or you have this immediate small glimpses many times during the day of your true nature, and then you learn to familiarize yourself and then live in the world. So traditionally there's a period of time in India where they talk about the 84,000 Mahasiddhas. And what it is a period when people were practicing Sutra Mahamudra, and there was this great flourishing of awakening in the midst of cities, in the midst of everyday life. So these were non-monastic people who just were doing all sorts of jobs and trades, but they were teaching each other this Mahamudra style, direct recognition, gradual unfolding, and it just caught fire. And so it seems that this is a time in this contemporary time that we can awaken in the midst of our daily life rather than having to go to a monastery. So these kind of pointing traditions or glimpsing traditions are ways to immediately see how close the awakening is, that everyone has this awakening naturally. And I've seen people walk off the street in New York City who were dragged there by their girlfriend or something, and they're just like waiting in the back and going like, all right, I'll sit through this if we get to go out to dinner afterwards. And then I do a couple of these little pointers, and they're going like, oh my God, this is incredible. I can't believe this. What is this? So it's so available because it's natural.
Yeah, it's actually, it can happen very quickly.
The glimpse
with help. This is where I keep coming back to the fact that I think it's important to receive this transmission from people who have had it before, rather than just trying to. Well, you can work with who am I, and that will work. But I find that if you try and work it with yourself, you and isolate yourself, it can lead to a kind of neurosis. And this happens quite a bit in the non-dual communities with people who say like, oh, there's just nothing to do, nowhere to go, you're already enlightened, and just
and then they do nothing, and
yes. And so you have a guided meditation in the CD, and I loved it. It was great. The other thing which I wanted to know is, you speak in a very secular language, right? And there are so many terms that you used in the CD which sound very similar. I can't recall all of them, but it's like open awareness, consciousness. Now, did you make an effort to translate those Tibetan terms, which I'm sure have specific meanings, into your own language? Or is it more of just a natural arising of your own understanding of what these states are?
Yes. So, I mean, I both, went to India, Sri Lanka, and Nepal, and spent a year and a half there. And then I studied with many of the teachers here who've come over from many different traditions. Tibetan, from also Indian, from Taoist, from Theravada traditions, different Zen, and then read many of the texts that have just been translated in the Dzogchen Mahamudra traditions, just in last 20 years, really, that were not available before. And then mainly did my own practice and checked it out with different teachers. How's this? What's this? And then would go in and see what it is and what are they saying there? What does that mean? Let me go see. Oh, I see what they mean. Well, why are they saying it that way? It seems like, oh, and then this other one says it this way and he says it that way, but then I think it's more like this. And then I would translate it into direct experience and then translate the direct experience into contemporary language and then test it out with students and then get feedback and then translate it again so that I make it as simple and as embodied as possible without a lot of terms that aren't needed because they're all about different dimensions of consciousness. That some are new, but they're not that unusual when they're experienced.
So do you have a private practice? How do you tell us about your teaching and what kind of format is that right now?
Yeah, so I started as doing both graduate work in psychology and spirituality, and then I went off on a fellowship to Sri Lanka, India, and Nepal. Then I came back and did a joint degree with clinical social work, and I worked with creating shelters for the homeless and worked in outpatient mental health with people with, Axis 1 diagnosis, who would come from community houses and then started a private practice and meanwhile was teaching and helped start the New York Insight Meditation Society and was teaching there. And then had met Toka Urgyen Rinpoche, who was my first Tibetan teacher, and then I started studying with his sons, Soni Rinpoche and Mingyur Rinpoche. And eventually Mingyur Rinpoche asked me to teach Sutra Mahamudra. And then, so for the last 10 years, 12 years now, I've been doing that, and I also met at the same time Adyashanti, and kind of immediately saw that he and I had very similar ways of experiencing and talking, so we kind of joined, and I joined with him in his lineage of modern modern expression. And so now I used to see people in more classical, never totally just psychological, but always mixing meditation or spirituality and psychology. But now mostly I teach more full-time and then work with people individually who are actually in the middle of awakening. So that's primarily, I kind of am specializing in people who are on the journey of awakening and don't have a guide, are stuck in a certain stage. There many, as you describe, are people who get a little on the couch potato mode or the dissociated mode, and they say, my partner tells me I can't relate anymore, but I think I'm nobody, and then they need a little help to kind of realize that they are actually.
It's quite a worrying position to be in this modern day age. If you were in India, people would understand.
They might understand.
But, it's
and what I find is it's just that they've started a journey and they've set up camp partway. Usually, they're in what's called emptiness of emptiness, or these other terms which are from different traditions that describe kind of cul-de-sacs along the way, but they're saying, or being told or off by themselves, thinking, well, something's definitely changed, I'm going to call it awakening, and they put a flag in it and stay there, and they don't let the unfolding or know how to unfold, which direction to look. So that's important.
Now, with regards to psychological development of developmental psychology with Piaget and all these, people talk about ego development levels, and even these days we have the transpersonal levels that are being mapped out. This is based on Wilber's work. How does that relate to awakening?
Yeah, that's a very good question because, again, it's almost like on the ultimate and the relative level. So on the ultimate level, awakening seems to be the same always. And the awake awareness is not developing or growing by itself. That dimension of consciousness seems to, when it's accessed, when people awaken into it, it's always that pure awareness that's dynamically, potentially available as primary intelligence. Mm-hmm. Now, then on the other side, the relative reality is, being a human being and having awakeness be like the human being arising from consciousness as the wave of the particular creature, the particular pattern of consciousness called human. Then there's flowers and there's animals and there's trees that are patterns of consciousness that have their own growth and development.
Okay.
So then human beings have a certain development, and most children around the world, as we know, regardless of what they're taught, have a similar early development. They develop certain things just naturally. And then one of the most important points regarding development is at about 18 months to 2 years, there's often what's called in children, interestingly, self-awareness develops. Mm-hmm. And self-awareness has two different aspects. One is that children can look in a mirror and realize, oh, that's me. And they become aware, self-aware, oh, I'm Johnny, and that's Billy, and that's Mary. And, Johnny, yes. And then, oh, Johnny, don't touch the stove. Before that, they'll go off and, just say, don't touch the stove, and they'll go back and just touch the stove. Mm-hmm. And now they have a awareness of who they are and who others are. And then what that is kind of the ability to think about thinking.
Meta thinking.
The meta thinking.
Yeah.
And so the meta thinking, which is an important cognitive task, important developmental task, seems to, at least this is my feeling at this point, is that is what develops into a little identity, into this little I, is a pattern of thought that's useful developmentally, and then because it keeps going, it almost begins to feel like there's a little me, like a ghost in the machine, in your head that is like, oh, well, this is me. Don't tell them what you're about to say, but I'm thinking, and I'm in here, and I can't believe you just said that. I can't believe you just said that. So who's the one who's saying, I can't believe you just said that to yourself? So it's almost like there's two inside of you, and you're the one that's the commentator, meta consciousness, self-aware, looping, self-referencing me that ends up feeling like a little entity, and then it's almost as if it co-opts the body's boundary program because it thinks it's an entity, and it feels like it has to get something to be satisfied, just like the body craves something, and it feels like it has to protect itself from dying as if it's a real entity, so it's fearful and craving all the time, but it's actually just a pattern of thought that when it relaxes, it returns to thinking and ego function. And it doesn't die, and it can't ever satisfy itself. Mm-hmm. So it's always perpetually dissatisfied, which is what dukkha means, suffering. Mm-hmm. So this feeling of perpetual dissatisfaction is what creates this neurotic suffering and this other level of suffering, that when that I relaxes, the sense of craving and desire and aversion drop away in a moment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you're free of that kind of suffering. Mm-hmm. And that's the beginning. So it seems like I can put it back together and step out. Put it back together, come back, step out. And you just kind of come back, that awareness, identify with that, and then you feel it. Oh my God, what is he saying? Okay, ready? Unhook and drop. And as soon as you do that, what's gone? Oh, worry, stress is gone. Do you need anything missing? No. Mm-hmm. Anything need to be gotten to be okay? Mm-hmm. No. So then there's the definition on the first level of freedom of suffering. Mm-hmm. Within that moment. So it seems that in terms of describing it in consciousness and where it meets with awareness and with human development, it seems like that's the genesis of the creation of the rudiments of this sense of the mistaken identity.
Would you call this the ego?
Well, what I do is I call it the ego identity. So in other words, I say, and this is, there is an ego body, there's an ego function, there's an ego personality that each of us have differently. There's no problem with those. It's only the ego identity, which is the ego function plus thinking, that identifies with itself, that self-references, that creates a secondary ego. That pattern, which people call the small self, or the secondary I, the one that you wake up from, then you still have an ego personality, ego function, ego body, meaning you have a name, you have a separate sense of self. And that's where some confusion lies, is that people think, they say things like, oh, well, you need to let go of your story. It's like, no, when you wake up, you're still like, I was born here, then I went here, then that's not a problem.
Yeah, I guess, so I would add that from my own experiences, this ego identity is a rigid concept. It's almost as if because life is obviously so dynamic and changes from minute to minute to moment to moment, right. And it's almost as if the rigidness, the stubbornness to clinging on to a certain point of view is what causes the suffering, because you have this dissociation between what reality is bombarding you with, or you're just flowing with reality. But then there's this ego identity that's just dragging through the wake of reality, that's causing a lot of friction, so to speak, which is suffering.
Yes, that's right. And it really isn't. It isn't as if I'm clinging to the ego. It's literally like the pattern is creating itself. The pattern is developmentally clinging to itself and creating it, and it's such a habit that you're not even doing it, and you're trying from it to not cling to things, but it actually doesn't help. So it really is just this first direct untying of the knot, or deconstructing, or stepping out, or dropping, or letting go, or surrendering of awareness out of the pattern. Or you can do the resting method like shikantaza, or just sitting, which you just wait till the mud settles. You wait till the mud settles in the pond. But this inquiry method, which I like, you immediately have awareness, which is actually the awakeness that you already are, just unhook from thought, and then just step out of that pattern, and the pattern collapses. And the awareness is now aware here, or it's aware here, and you're aware from there, and now you're aware from here, and then if anything moves, it's only thinking, which is not a problem, because there's no thinker. The thinker's collapsed.
Can you say a little bit about time in past and future and present, and how that ties into what we're saying?
Yes. So this is another kind of unique clarification I make, is that, you hear kind of popularly, be in the present moment, or live in the present. And actually, you can't live in the present moment. You can't get in the present moment as defined. So if we define present moment and present as they're culturally defined in the dictionary, they're of no extra value any different than past or future, in that present moment is like the tick-tock of a clock. Present gone, present gone, present gone. Present moment, present moment, present moment, present moment. It's a moment that's gone, a short, it says in the dictionary, a short unit of time. So it's coming and going. So that in some ways is actually what mindfulness meditation notices right away, is, oh, thoughts come and go. Oh, things come and go. So you're not supposed to get in the present moment, you're supposed to actually notice, oh, present moments are changing, they're coming and going.
Interesting.
Then the present is a relative time. So the Tibetan word for the now is defined as the fourth timeless time that includes the three relative times. So the fourth timeless time means there's a timeless dimension, but it includes past, present, and future, the three relative times. So those are equally relative. Ultimately, there's timelessness, but the now is actually, when the two come together, the timelessness and the relative times, and you're here. So the now can be aware of being here and can remember, be focused on, the relative past, or can plan for, write a list of what you're going to go shopping for in the future, or decide I better get a plane ticket, before, because I'm going there. There's no problem with relative future, relative past. And in fact, people who are depressed, what they report is they're trapped in the present. They're like, oh my God, I'm so depressed, this will never change. There's no future. The present is killing me. Nothing will change. Well, can't you remember how you were depressed last time you came out? No, I can't remember the past. And what about, don't you think no. This is it. This is reality, the present. And it's killing me, So the present is not always the solution, and living in the present moment is impossible. And the now is really important to understand, that it is this timelessness with time that is a dimension of, you might say, space-time, if it's spacious awareness with the now.
Okay, in that sense.
In that sense.
Okay.
In like relative space-time, and then this is ultimate spaciousness, and the now, time of now, is the dimension where those two are related. Spacious awareness and the now are the way that awakening is experienced.
Okay, so just to rewind.
You asked the question. I figured I might as well give you
Careful what you ask.
full answer.
Careful what you ask. What does enlightenment mean? Is enlightenment? So I like Peter Fenner's work a lot, and one of Peter Fenner's books, he has this chart. I might try and put it up if I can, but he talks about this open awareness sort of moving through stages. So you can have one experience, and then ego sort of, the mud sort of comes back, and you clean it up again, and then the mud comes back and clean it up again. So where does enlightenment fit into all of this? Is there a stage where you completely identify with open spacious awareness and just rest in that forever? Is that being enlightened, or are we already enlightened?
Yes, I think I think there's. I tend to use the word awakening rather than enlightenment, just because enlightenment because it has that, T at the end. It has done. I'm enlightened or not enlightened. Enlightenment, rather than awakening, which does have a dynamic process.
Yes.
So there seems to be a continual awakening or unfolding that's never quite done. I mean, if you look at some of the people like Ramana Maharshi, he was in the basement of a church, then he was by himself at the top of the cave, and then he was with his mother and some friends at the top and then he came down the hill to the community, and then he was with animals and people by the end. So there's some kind of unfolding, almost like the Zen pictures of awakening that go from from this emptiness near the end is these pictures of catching the bowl of enlightenment, and then there's a picture of emptiness or nothing in the middle, but that's not the end. Then there's first there was a mountain, then there was no mountain, then there was, and then the last picture is returning to the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's kind of an unfolding embodied journey. So it seems that there is a progressive kind of discovery of awakening or awake awareness as the primary dimension in a glimpse. So that sometimes called recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And people have glimpses of that. And then the discovery that the awake awareness is not something you're experiencing, but it's actually who you are, and you're experiencing from awake awareness the movement or the changing dynamics of thoughts and feelings that you thought were you, but now you realize, oh, those are happening within this, and that feeling is like a realization that this is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a process of stabilization, which is that happens, more, and it's more primary, and it happens when you go to sleep and when you wake up, and still there's kind of an unfolding or a mixing of the two.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a kind of knowing who you are, but the living of it has a process of developing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth stage after recognition, realization, stabilization is called expression. So there's compassionate expression or expression from awakening of living in a dynamic world and relating and creating.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems to continue to unfold and kind of have new, everything's new and dynamic all the time.
Mm-hmm. So what does this mean for free will?
That's one of the tricky questions, and it's hard to not.
Who is the one that's having the will?
Who's having the one that's having the will? So it's kind of a hard one to not answer intellectually, and it's kind of like if you don't have the experience, it's something like ultimately there's no free will. Relatively, you kind of at any point act as if there is. In other words, or you feel as if. That's kind of like tongue-in-cheek, but you feel like if you are the awakeness coming into consciousness, the awakeness has free will. So in other words, it's dynamically expressing itself through its consciousness and its level of consciousness at any moment is about the best you can say. And so sometimes believing you have no free will is often many people and teachers who believe they have no free will are the ones who end up acting out ethically. There's a whole group of people who say there's no doer here, and they take it as if there's, it's just happening by itself. But actually they've given up the dynamic integrity, responsibility, integration of that ethical, seeing the other person as yourself. And seeing the culture as your family. And that seems to be important to realize that you have choice, that there is choice from an intelligence that has discriminating wisdom. Maybe that's the best way to say it.
This is actually a really important point. In fact, Jeff Foster has a YouTube video about this. It's called the Advaita Trap.
Okay.
So people who get into a kind of absolute spiritual superego, and ego hides in there.
Yeah.
It's a very tricky place to hide because whatever you're saying, it's in line with the absolute, but it's the quality of it. It's how you express it that's rigid. I'd like to finish off with Tonglen. So actually, I've been doing some Tonglen. I wanted to talk about Tonglen. And tell us what Tonglen is and what does it mean? Yes.
So you may have seen in the book and in the audio, which the audio is not an audio of the book, but it's actually just the practices in the book, and there's about 31 of them. And so toward the end, I build the guided meditations are about 3 to 8 minutes, and they build so they're teaching you almost really teaching the awakeness that you are, how to dynamically, discover the full map of your own consciousness, how to navigate your own consciousness, so that you untie the knots of how you're bound and are able to kind of freely live, not only free of the mind, but free within your body, and then opening your compassionate heart so that you wake out. And so Tonglen is kind of an expression of the heart, of this natural love and compassion that people often start to experience naturally as kind of a sweet sadness or a tenderness of the heart that happened just yesterday when I was teaching this workshop. The number of people would say like, well, I just feel the pain of the world, but it's okay. You know, and I feel like I want to help, but I don't feel like I have to. I feel like I will respond, but I don't need to save the world. You know, there's kind of this paradoxical ability to be sensitive and compassionate, but not feel like you should be doing something or guilty or something.
There's a lot of guilt in that.
Yeah, there's a lot of guilt in that from your mind or from the shoulds.
Yes.
So this is kind of this amazing experience that as you discover the unfolding and the movement of shifting into this consciousness, you discover these dimensions of consciousness already have love in them, that you're not creating them. So on some level, when you do a practice like loving kindness practice, you're using your relative imagination and mind and to create a state of loving kindness, which, you know, again, is wonderful, lovely. It has nice effects. It's called a shamatha practice, a calm abiding practice. But when you do these ultimate practices, you shift in, and all of a sudden you discover, oh, I already feel loving. And rather than trying to accept things as they are, you shift and you realize, oh, from here I accept everything already. So this is one of the kind of direct practice discoveries that you can have by doing these practices.
And you would call this relative Tonglen and absolute Tonglen?
Yes, and absolute Tonglen. So relative Tonglen is a little bit like the practice of loving kindness. So traditionally it's called giving and taking Tonglen. So you're actually doing the opposite of what sometimes is done in other kind of more new age practices, which is you send out the bad and you take in the good. So, you know, say like, well, let's get rid of all your negative energy and then, you know, take in all the good energy of the universe, which, you know, again, on some level is good. So the interesting thing about Tonglen is you're actually sending out love and compassion and taking the pain of others into your heart. And it's, you know, traditionally moderate to advanced practice, you know, after you've had a good deal of practice. And what I discovered is that doing that many people I talked to would feel like they were actually taking on and feeling kind of sensitively or emotionally overwhelmed by the taking in all that pain. They felt like sometimes their compassion would increase, but they also felt sometimes like they would feel a little overwhelmed by literally starting to be better at feeling the pain without the support. So the practice that I kind of expanded this into, this ultimate Tonglen, is rather than taking it into your heart, your physical heart or your emotional heart, is that people discover this heart space that opens up behind your back. And so that you actually begin by unhooking awareness from thought and going back behind your heart to discover the timeless, boundless, awake awareness that that's thought-free and free of the senses. So that only awareness can actually feel awareness behind your back, because there's no sense there. You can't see it, you can't really smell it or hear it, you can't touch it. So that's a discovery that awareness can know itself. And people feel that is true, and they have unhooked and discovered this awareness. And then once they surrender back to that, they discover that without their help, the field of awareness is already coming into their body, inhabiting their body from top to bottom, feeling both the aliveness, any ignorance or pain that they have, and feeling the awakeness that is embodied in them. And then that love and compassion goes out to the other person, either in front of them or wherever they are sending it. Sometimes I have people sit facing each other, and the love and compassion goes to them and sees the awakeness and the ignorance and suffering and humanity of the other person, and then actually continues through their heart behind them to the support of the field of awake awareness behind their back, until that support is supporting both of you. And then that that field of rigpa, or awake awareness, or open-hearted awareness, comes back through them, and then their pain and their suffering and their awakeness come to you, and you take on their suffering, but then you don't hold it as an individual, you give it to all that which can handle the suffering of people, which is your support of the field of awareness behind your back.
Yeah, well, actually, when I was reading that about the heart chakra, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Barbara Ann Brennan.
Yeah, I've read some of hers. Yeah.
So this is obviously into
Yeah.
more New Agey category, but when she maps out the chakras, there's a frontal chakra and a back chakra. So these are fields of energy.
Yes,
This energy that's flowing with the system. Anyway, this is it sounds, obviously this is, don't quote me on this, but it's an interesting point.
Yes.
Loch, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken.
Wonderful to have so many insights from you.
Thank you so
Anything
much.
else that you'd like to add?
No, I think this was wonderful to spend time with you and to talk about this book and about these modern ways of bringing this non-dual embodied awareness into the world and make it available to people and give them courage and feeling of possibility that awakening is possible for everyone.
Yes, great.
Yeah, thank you.
Shift into Freedom, great book, highly recommended, published by Sounds True.
Yep.
And if you have questions for Loch or myself, please post them in the comment box.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great.
All right, good.
That was
very
fun.
nice. That
Yeah, that
went
was
very
nice.
smoothly.
Yes.
I got you with the now. Now
The now.